Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of our Lightning interview series. As always, we want to make these sessions interesting and interactive. So please do introduce yourself on our chat channel and tell us where you're joining from and what you do. And for sure, please do feel free to add your questions to this conversation. So our guest today is the highly regarded Sahar Dolev from Iguazio, which was recently acquired by McKinsey. And we've been talking a long time about Gen AI and large language models, but how do we actually get these to work in the real world? So Sahar is going to give us some invaluable insights on that. But first, I want to mention a few other upcoming events we have here. We do have a webinar from Microsoft on responsible model training on October 10th. That will be followed on October 13th, which, yeah, I guess that's a Friday. Hope our guest is not suspicious. But that will be with the legendary Jack McCauley, which you may know him from. He was one of the co-founders of the Oculus VR, which had the Oculus Rift headset, and that was very influential and pioneering devices in the modern VR era. I think it later got acquired by Facebook, but really had a big impact on the both the gaming and tech industry. So do check that interview out next weekend, Friday the 13th. And following that on October 20th, we have another lightning interview on no code, low code, and how that can help make AI more inclusive. And on to our ODSC West events. Been talking about that for a couple of weeks now. It is again happening in the heart of Silicon Valley, right between South San Francisco there and Silicon Valley in beautiful Burlingame, California. We do have a multimodal hackathon going on. That is definitely a hot topic these days. So that's a free event to join. That's going to be on Tuesday of the conference. And I think we've already got about 70 or 80 signups on that. I think we're capping out at a couple hundred. So make sure you get your company involved, your team involved, and reserve a space before they're all gone. And we are very pleased to announce our esteemed keynotes, at least our first batch anyway. So we have a great lineup both of in-person as well as virtual keynotes. So if you can't make it to Burlingame on October 30th to November 2nd, grab one of our training passes. We still have some discounts on those, and we do, of course, have our virtual open pass available. So if you're joining us virtually today, and will be next month, grab one of those. And ODSC, you can see the program has been announced. I think we still have maybe another 15 or 16 sessions we're waiting on for the speakers to provide, but for the most part, I think we've got about 170, 180 sessions there. So do check that out. A great program around LLMs, Gen AI, fine-tuning, training, prompt engineering, and of course, machine learning, deep learning, LLMs, AI safety, all the usual topics. So again, do check out that open pass. Lots of great content online if you want to join us virtually. All right, so our discussion today is on the topic of LLMs. And to facilitate that discussion, our guest today is Sahar Dolev, as already mentioned. And Sahar is a VP of Marketing at Iguazio, which was recently acquired by McKinsey. So congratulations on that, Sahar. And this is a company at the forefront of MLOps, enabling enterprises to seamlessly deploy, develop, and manage AI applications. And Sahar has a tenure stretching over 4 years at Iguazio, and she's been pivotal in driving the company's marketing strategies, emphasizing its MLOps capabilities that cater to a wide range of enterprise use cases, from fraud prediction to real-time recommendations. And before that, Sahar had spent over 18 years in tech marketing. Now, apart from her roles in corporations, Sahar is a proud member of the GCMO Forum, an exclusive community that brings together top CMOs from global companies, startups, and VCs in Israel. And she also co-founded the startup DevTech Marketing Pros, a community for leaders in DevTech. Sahar is an alumnus of Tel Aviv University, where she boasts an MBA degree and holds a BA in Business Management and Psychology. And today she frequently engages in discussions encompassing topics like LLMOps, such as today, MLOps, data science, AI for business, and digital strategies, and helps shape insights that emerge both our management prowess and our expansive professional experience. Sahar, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Seamus. It's great to be here.
Yeah, Sahar, great to see you again. So before we get into a little bit about yourself and Iguazio, just for the sake of the topic today, tell me a bit about how you define and what we mean by large language model operations, LLMOps, and how does it differ from MLOps, and what's its significance in the current AI ecosystem? So, a bit of a long question to start off with, but would love to hear your insights on that.
Yeah, it's a great one, though, and one that's been creating a lot of discussion in the market today. LLMOps is quite a new term that's come up, and certainly operationalizing large language models come with their own set of complexities. The models are much larger, they require more scale, they require the use of GPUs, which we know is often kind of short in demand. So how do you kind of operationalize LLMs in a really efficient way? How do you use GPUs in an efficient way? Can you partition them and so on? There's lots of different complexities that come into play when you're dealing with LLM ops. But actually, if you think about it, it's really an extension of MLOps. And the problems are just being confounded by the fact that these models come at scale and that they have their own set of complexities and risk and compliance and so on. But really, the foundation is the same. And if you think about taking a model into production, and the type of infrastructure that you need, the software that you need, it's really no different than a regular model, just at scale and with additional complexities. Right. And I think that's something that's really important to note. And obviously now with the huge kind of advancements in Gen AI in general, right? I mean, ChatGPT reached 1 million users in like 5 days. So just the rapid pace of it and the fact that everyone's talking about it makes MLOps and LLMOps much more important than ever.
No, for sure. And our whole program for ODSC West in a few weeks, I think a significant portion of it is based around LLMs and Gen AI. And I see, I think once the excitement has faded and we started working with LLMOps, the deployment is a key part of that. So we definitely want to peel the onion, so to speak, and get a little bit more into that. But before that, I would, we've known Iguazio. It's been a great startup, and congratulations to you and the team. Sahar, you were recently acquired by McKinsey. But can you briefly describe Iguazio and its primary mission for our listeners who might not be familiar with Iguazio?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you. We're all really excited about the acquisition, about this next phase in Iguazio's journey. Iguazio's mission is really to help enterprises bring data science to life. That's what we've done from day one, and that's what we really excel in doing. We feel that data science is much too important to stay in the lab. And research today shows that still 90% of AI projects never make it to production and never create real business impact. And that's what Iguazio is all about. It's really helping enterprises see the real value from their AI initiatives and start to see ROI and to measure that ROI. The path from the lab to production is a very complex one. I'm sure that most people that are familiar with ODSC know that. We talk about it quite a lot, and the events are often focused on that as well. But really, it's a matter of how do we build AI applications in production and in live business environments, and how do we think about it as early as possible in the process? Because we know that when enterprises take a production first approach and really think about what are the kind of building blocks that we're going to need when we're ready to get to production, and later when we're ready to scale, right? I mean, it's different to take one model to production and to take multiple models in real time, kind of in real business environments. So there's another leap that needs to be taken after that. And this is really what Iguazio is all about. Like you mentioned earlier, development, deployment, management of AI applications in production. That's what we're here to help clients do.
No, fantastic. And so it's still early days yet, and lots of people are in the experimental stage with LLMOps, whether you're using it at home or in your company, assuming they allow you to use it. You're playing around with ChatGPT, you might be playing around with a Tropic, you might be playing around with a Falcon, Llama, one of these many open source models. But at the end of the day, moving on to real world applications, can you share some success stories or use cases where a company has benefits from using LLMOps, where they're actually putting their own LLMs into production?
Yeah, so first of all, we see a lot of interest from clients in Gen AI. Obviously, this is a huge, huge topic of interest right now. We see a lot of interest in two use cases specifically. The first one is around generating subject matter experts, or SME. So think about a chatbot that's expert on your topic, whether it's healthcare, retail, whatever it is you're doing. That can be an aid to the client or the customer success team, for example, or it can be something that you embed on the website and can answer questions for customers. So this is one use case that we're seeing a lot of interest in. And the other is call center analysis. So a lot of enterprises have large call centers. They want to analyze what's going on those calls. They want to understand which topics are being discussed, what the sentiment is in general. Are people happy with the service? Are they not? Which reps are doing a good job? Which ones need additional training? That is another use case that we're seeing a lot of interest in. And at the end of the day, these are all applications that can help existing teams do their job a lot more efficiently, a lot better, can create a lot of satisfaction from the customer side. And this is really where we see the market going. Everything that has to do with kind of language, right? Everything that's more kind of creative, obviously, Gen AI takes you in that kind of direction. So these are the areas that we're seeing clients go into. And, it's still early days. We have some clients that are implementing these applications in production right now. I think there's going to be a lot more. Recently, we had a call with a Gartner analyst who said that only 2% of the applications today are Gen AI. I mean, 90% of the conversation is about Gen AI for sure. But in practice, only about 2% of the applications are Gen AI driven. So I think it's still very early days, but we're going to see a lot of impact with these types of use cases.
Yeah, and yeah, great use cases and great insights. And I love that comment around the 2% because it makes sense, right? Like, first of all, you don't want people rushing with these models because we know there's a lot of challenges around them, and there's been a lot of talk about that. So can you elaborate on that conversation you had? Because what are you finding? So those are some great use cases. I know you're talking to a lot of clients out there, and that's why I love having experts like you on the show, because you have insights that many of us don't. When we're working in a company, we're only like just focused on our own company. But what are you feeling are some of the biggest challenges that businesses face when trying to operationalize these kinds of LLMs into production?
Yeah, so there's a couple of challenges that really stand out. The first one I would say is risk and compliance. Companies are very concerned about introducing their proprietary data externally. And think about it. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. If you have a lot of proprietary data, you need it to train a model to understand your real kind of business use case and so on. But you don't want other people getting access to that. You don't want the models using that data for training and so on. So this is a big, concern that enterprises have. Another one is the cost. GPT-4 was trained using, I think it's 25,000 GPUs. It costs something like $10 million, which is an incredible number. I mean, most enterprises can't train their own LLMs. It's just the reality of the situation. And that's where there are other solutions that companies can take. The third one I would say is the whole area of operationalization. So really getting your application into production, managing it in production, monitoring it, retraining if needed. LLMs, as opposed to kind of more simple models, need that constant kind of retraining. They need the reinforcement learning from human feedback. And that's something that's very important. And that's, by the way, another difference from kind of normal MLOps. But a lot of enterprises don't know this, that you don't need to actually build your own LLM. You can actually fine tune an existing LLM and get a model that's much smaller in size. It's a lot more cost efficient, and it actually brings the best value to the business, because your use case is usually a certain kind of simple use case. You don't need the entire LLM. You can just train a model to fit your specific needs, and that makes the whole process a lot more efficient. It also makes the MLOps component a lot better, faster. You get just better results that way.
Yeah, it's an interesting point about companies not needing to fine-tune their own models. So how would you look at that in terms of, I can use ChatGPT's OpenAI rather, or Anthropic's API. Why do I, how does Iguazio help in that case? Because why do I need MLOps, or how do you differentiate from other MLOps or data science platforms on the market, or versus just using a straight API call? Be good to understand that a little.
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, in general, Iguazio is very focused on the production side. There's lots of companies that do a lot of work on the development side and auto ML and things like that. That's not where Iguazio focused. We really focus on operationalization. Our platform has four kind of main pillars that really help with acceleration and automation of the data science process. The first one is a feature store. The second is real-time serving pipelines, CI/CD for machine learning and monitoring. So once you're ready to deploy the model, and this can be a kind of generic AI use case as well, then it's really, really easy to deploy into production, do that in a fast and efficient way, and also scale once you're ready. And we have clients in the transportation field, for example, who are running dozens of models in production in a real live business environments and seeing tens of millions of dollars from each use case. So, this is the type of scale that you can get to. To your question about Gen AI, so I'll just give you an example. You can take an LLM, it can be commercial, it can be open source, it doesn't matter. You can fine tune it using your proprietary data on Iguazio. You can do that, by the way, in a completely secure environment. So, the risk factor that we were talking about earlier becomes, it's mitigated essentially. And then you can take that model that's been fine-tuned and put it into production to tackle a specific problem. So again, this won't be an LLM. It won't be able to, it's not ChatGPT. It won't be able to answer any question in the universe and images and everything else, but it will serve the purpose of a specific application that you're looking to build. We talked about chatbots earlier. We talked about call center analysis. It can be any other kind of use case. And it does that in a really efficient way. One of the things, for example, is GPU sharing. So Iguazio enables, and we know that GPUs are difficult to obtain right now, and there's long waiting lists. It takes months to generate to receive the GPUs. So you can actually partition your jobs on separate GPUs. So you can use smaller GPUs and actually use a couple of them for the same task. And you can also orchestrate or share the GPUs so that you can do that across different projects. So the GPU doesn't have to capture, the application doesn't need to capture the GPU when it's not using it actively.
Yeah, that's very cool. And just going back to your point on ease of use, I think a lot of that comes down to integration. And one of the things I've noticed about from feedback from the Iguazio's platforms and the strength is the integration of popular data science tools that we're always talking about at ODSC, for example, and they come pre-installed. So I think that's always been a big win. And I think it's very important as well because the field is changing so quickly. So it seems like you guys are always at the are providing the latest tools. So how do you decide what are the tools you want to integrate with? And are there any upcoming integrations that we should be looking towards or excited about?
Yes, first of all, thank you. We try our best, and it comes a lot from listening to our clients. We kind of see what our clients are interested in, what they're using and they want to utilize, and we make that our priority. We've also always taken a very open approach. So Iguazio is based on open source frameworks that we build and maintain. MLRun is one, Nucleo is another. It's our MLOps orchestration framework and our serverless functions framework. And we really believe in having an open ecosystem. And the way that the product is built and architectured is in that with that kind of in mind. So the architecture is really open. It can integrate with any type of external or partner software. And we also go where our clients go. So recently we integrated with Hugging Face. We actually have a great webinar about that integration. And this was before kind of the, before the rise of Gen AI. It was, kind of last year already. We were talking about transfer learning and things like that together with Hugging Face, because we saw that our clients were interested in that and it creates a lot of value for them. We also integrate with a lot of cloud software. So we're very closely partnered with AWS, with Microsoft, with Google. We have very tight integration with tools like SageMaker, Azure ML, and so on. We're working on an integration with Databricks, or more like an acceleration of the integration. We already have something in place, but we're enhancing that quite a lot. And again, we're just very, very open in terms of our strategy. And we really like to kind of play well with others.
Yeah, very nice. Follow the data, as I like to say. Follow the data. what you guys seem to do.
Exactly.
You mentioned Neurillo and ML Run. I know Neurillo has got about 5 or 6,000 stars on GitHub. Seems to be quite a popular open source project. Can you tell us a little bit more about those open source projects that you guys support and help build out for the community?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, this is part of our strategy, and it has been from day one. Nucleo is our real-time serverless frameworks functions framework, and MLRun is our MLOps orchestration framework, and both of them form the core of the Iguazio solution. Inside MLRun, for example, you can find things like the real-time serving pipelines, the feature store that I mentioned earlier, model monitoring capabilities, and CI/CD for machine learning. And the important thing is that it's all kind of streamlined together. So it's very easy to accelerate your AI projects. There's a lot of automation that's baked in. With a single MLRun function, you can actually trigger 9 different actions that take place. So think about the amount of code you save. You save about 90% of the code, and this frees up your team to do more work on the business value, on scaling the initiatives, instead of the data wrangling and the kind of mundane tasks of MLOps. So really, it's built with scale and automation in mind, and it comes across the entire kind of data science process. And this is the foundation for the Iguazio solution.
Yes, Sahar, just looking at a few questions here. So there's an interesting one is no name on it, but could you please explain the tool that is used in CI/CD? So I guess that's continuous integration, continuous deployment, and how the model is deployed in production with Iguazio. Yeah, so just continuous integration, continuous deployment is a interesting topic these days.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, go ahead.
Definitely. So it's Git-based CI/CD. We actually also have a great webinar on that goes into kind of the technical details and how it's used on our website. But the idea is that MLRun really orchestrates the entire MLOps process end to end. And often when people say MLOps, they're actually just thinking about that kind of model training loop, the evaluation and the model training and the retraining. But when you look at MLOps from a wider lens, a lot of it is really about the data and about how you do things like model monitoring and integration into live ops and the data kind of prep. And it's really a bigger piece of the puzzle. And MLRun really orchestrates that entire process. The deployment is done with MLRun and Nucleo. So it's real time, it's very fast, it's really easy to do. And another thing that's worth mentioning is that it can work in different environments. So we were talking earlier about the benefits or the differences of kind of using Gen AI and the cost component. So with Iguazio, you can seamlessly work either on cloud, and it works on any of the main cloud providers, or on premises. And we have clients that work in complete dark sites, sometimes for data security or for regulation purposes. Banks, healthcare, those types of clients need that type of ability to deploy in on-prem in kind of dark sites. And so you can do that in a really easy way. And you can also migrate from one to the other. So you can start by deploying on premises and then move to the cloud. Or you can do that based on cost considerations. It's all very easy, it's very fast, and you don't need to rebuild anything.
Nice. The questions are flowing fast and furious now, Sahar. We have some good ones. So Kieran,
got the conversation going.
Exactly. See the conversation. So you fine-tuned it. Kieran Kumar is asking, are we using any API interactions, and how about fine-tuning of custom data? So yeah, so everyone wants to fine-tune their LLM models, of course, for good reason. Can you talk about how Iguazio helps with that?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really great question. So first of all, you can take the open source model, the LLM, and it can be commercial, it can be open source, it doesn't matter. You can then use your proprietary data to fine tune that model. You can do it in your own environment, which means that there's no exposure to your personal data externally. And you can then take that model that you've trained and deploy it and manage it using the Iguazio software. So this all becomes a very streamlined activity.
That's interesting. And do you have any insights? Because I haven't had time. We're playing around with some of our own LLM models, but you see like Meta, for example, is coming out with various flavors of LLMs. I think the recent one that came out last week was a coding open source one, but they tend to have different parameter size. Does the size of the model have any impact? Well, I guess if it's on the cloud, it doesn't matter, right? But does that have any impact on the LLMOps, the complexity of it, or not so much?
So I think the main thing would be cost. I mean, if you think about GPUs that are needed for training, you're going to need a lot more GPUs. They're difficult to obtain, like we mentioned earlier. You're going to need to use them in an effective way. And this is where kind of GPU partitioning or GPU sharing is really, really important, because it can really lower your costs, make the whole process more efficient. Another thing is just, thinking about the retraining. So you really need that kind of feedback loop, and you need that in real time. So with larger scale models, it becomes more complex. So I think it's the same kind of idea, but it just becomes more complex when you're dealing with scale. And there, the issues of doing it in an effective way and orchestration become even more important.
No, excellent point. And Aljaz Ahmed has a question around feature stores. Could you please talk about that? And I do find this one interesting because when LLMs first came on the scene, it was all about the vector search and vector databases and working with vectors and vector embeddings and LLMs. But now I see a lot of people talking about feature stores as well. If you could tell us a bit more about feature stores and data implementation.
Yeah, absolutely. So our senior ML engineer actually coined a term that I really love. He said, a feature store is one data scientist's gift to another. And I think that's a really nice way of thinking about it. I mean, you've already gone to the trouble of building a feature, and now you share it with everyone else. So it can be used across teams, across projects. And I think that's a really incredible thing to do, especially as you're scaling. It also creates standardization across the organization, right? So if you're building different models, you want them all to take the same feature, because you want to be comparing apples to apples. So I think that does a lot in terms of just creating a baseline for the company. Another thing, and this is specific to Iguazio's feature store, not all feature stores do this, but it's not just a central repository for kind of storing and sharing your features, but it's also a data transformation engine, which means that if you wanted to calculate, for example, the standard deviation at a specific moment in time, you can do that using the Iguazio feature store because of its real-time capabilities. And I didn't mention this before, but real-time capabilities are kind of threaded throughout the Iguazio solution in the data kind of ingestion of streaming data and so on, in the feature store itself, which we're talking about now, in the serving, so the real-time serving pipelines, the real-time monitoring. So the real-time is an important component. And once enterprises are ready for that, Iguazio is kind of ready to take them to the next level of the real-time capabilities. So the feature store enables all of that. And it's also a huge time saver, just because you can share these features across all the different teams and different projects. As you scale, that becomes really important.
Yeah, brilliant. It's very interesting to see how feature stores as a concept were fairly new 2 or 3 years ago, at least in the industry, but now have become central. But I want to go back to a very good point you made, that operating LLMs can be very costly. And you've already mentioned a few best practices, but I would love to hear some more best practices that you guys have learned over time, especially for maybe some of the smaller size companies and startups out there are being scared away by the cost of training these fine-tuning these models. So if you could expand on that, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, I think the number one kind of tip is that you don't need to build your own LLM. There's plenty of LLMs out there. There's more and more large kind of tech giants that are going into the space and creating their own LLMs. There's no need to really build your own LLM for most cases, right? I mean, it depends on your use case, but for most use cases, it's enough to fine tune an existing LLM using your proprietary data. If you do that with the right technology, you'll also be able to save a lot on the costs of training by doing things like using your AI infrastructure in a more efficient way. I think it's also central to define your use case really well. Think about what exactly you need the fine-tuned LLM to do and only train it for that purpose. As opposed to kind of general LLMs, which again, can serve different functions. Most enterprises really need a specific use case where the model serves that specific point. And I think if you define it really well, then you can also cut out any extra noise and avoid any extra work that won't, in the end of the day, create value for the organization. And many organizations are starting to think like that right now. What is the ROI that we want to see from the model? I think we've matured from the place where we're experimenting and we're excited about data science and, we're working in the lab, to what kind of value is this really going to provide? What's the ROI that I can expect from this model? And I think when you paddle back from that kind of business perspective, you can do things in a very smart way, in a very efficient way.
That's great. And in terms of what's holding organizations back from building and deploying their own models, I definitely think it's fair to say that the concern around bias and fairness and making sure that the models they do release are fair. A lot of models are coming under scrutiny for that. So how can organizations use an LLMOps platform to help with this? Because it's one thing to say that we're going to build a model that's unbiased and fair, right? But the issue is, once you put it in production, who's there monitoring this and mitigating these biases? Like, how can LLMOps help with this very important issue?
Yeah, I think that's exactly the point. I mean, there's two kind of main areas where biases come into play. The first one, and probably the most important one, is in the data prep. So if in the data prep, the data that goes in is biased, and we all have biases, right? I actually saw an amazing example from Midjourney recently, where someone put in a prompt of "show me a child on their first day of school," and you get an amazing image of a boy in front of a kind of clean classroom. He's alone. There's a nice whiteboard behind him. Everything is beautiful and clean. And then they changed one word in the prompt. They said, "show me an Asian boy on their first day of school." And suddenly it's one of those old kind of chalkboards. There's lots of kids in the classroom. It changed the entire,
Yeah.
One word that changed, it changed the entire perspective. And I mean, this is a huge bias. And this is because the images that were fed into Midjourney in this case, but it can be any kind of AI tool, were biased themselves. So in order to mitigate that, it has to start from the data prep. It has to start from the training. And the way to do that is, first of all, to build a diverse team. Make sure that you have a team that encompasses, all different races, women and men, different ages. As the more the team is diverse, the less biases are going to be fed into the process. Secondly, is to provide a diverse data set. Of course, the more diverse the data set, the less the chances are for bias. And finally, monitoring. I mean, you mentioned that, and that's a huge kind of point in this journey. You have to monitor your models in production all the time, and you need to be able to understand when these biases occur, and then retrain the model using unbiased data.
Yeah, very, very fair point. And related to that is, you mentioned at the very start, is data privacy and security. With large language models, processing potentially sensitive text data. And again, you're working on massive sets, so it's not possible for a person to sit down and check all this data, even the traded data. How does a company ensure that data privacy and compliance is being followed? And can LLMOps help with that problem in particular?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, and this is something that we always tell our clients, be very careful with what data you put out there into, OpenAI and other kind of models, because you really can't control where it goes. And a lot of enterprises have this issue of, how do we keep our data secure? How do we make sure that, it's not kind of leaked anywhere? And there have been, cases in the very beginning of Gen AI. There have been cases of data leakages and so on. And I think their training of employees has become really important. But essentially, the idea is, if you fine tune a model using your own infrastructure and in your own environment, then you mitigate that risk. I mean, you're not putting it into external sources and kind of losing control. You're keeping the control within the company. And I think that that's a very important point. Another point is just education. I mean, make sure that people understand the risks and understand how comfortable your company is with different kind of processes and procedures.
Yeah, and we have a follow-up question on that from one of our listeners around those two challenges. So we're talking about data security and privacy and compliance, but the question is, any idea how the two challenges you mentioned, the compliance and the cost, will affect an LLM in the near future? So there's how do we balance that?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. I don't think that the two have been kind of fully addressed just yet, but I think there's a lot of things that we can do right now to kind of mitigate both of them. First of all, if you use the right kind of tools and technologies, you can dramatically reduce the cost that's involved in, fine tuning of an LLM, for example. And that's something that's really important. Another thing is just monitoring that cost, making sure that you understand how much you're going to be paying, and not have bill shock, right? Not be surprised at the end of the day. And that's also something that happens sometimes, especially with new technologies and with experimentation. Secondly is really the risk and compliance aspect, which you can't really overemphasize this, especially for enterprises that have a lot to lose if their data goes public and so on. You really need to be careful, and you need to be very vigilant of what's going on with your data, where it's going, what type of access you're providing at every point in the journey.
Yeah, and I think it's a super hard question to answer, right? Because if you feel like it's the cost of just deploying and building these and tuning and deploying these models enough, and you don't have enough for compliance, but what's the reputational risk? What's the potential damage to society? So I think that's one that needs a lot more consideration, and companies are holding back in that for good reason. There's also another very interesting question, which I haven't thought much about, but I think it's a very interesting one. What should be the best technology to build a chatbot with just a small data set with 2,000 Q&As, and how much I guess modeling would be required? Because I've actually played around with this, and at least if I can take this one, Sahar, but we've done 10,000 Q&A data sets to build our own chatbots, and with the context windows, I forget what the 3.5 one in ChatGPT is pretty big now. Anthropic's got an even bigger one. You can just do some prompt tuning where you're not even fine tuning a model, you're just feeding it in. But I found that we've faced a lot of issues with prompt tuning because one, it's infernal, you just feed it in, you have to store it. Custom instructions help. But I guess, is a set like that too small a set for something like LLMOps? Is LLMOps overkill for something like that? So how can it help with even smaller data sets? Or should I assume it's a medium to big data set problem?
Yeah, it's actually exactly what I was thinking. I mean, we work with a customer called Sense. They do HR tech, and their chatbot needs were very, very specific. They're using chatbot to kind of help with recruiting and with conversations with the people that are in the funnel and so on. And they actually they decided not to use Gen AI for their chatbot. We actually recently did a webinar with them, so this is all kind of very fresh in my mind. But I think that it really, really depends on the use case, and it depends on the data set as well, to your point. So I think we don't need to rush to use Gen AI for any type of use case. Sometimes we can use other methods that will be more cost effective and easier to implement.
Yeah, no, very well said. Because when I was sitting down with the program committee for ODSC, we had a discussion like, is there too much LLMs here? What about all the other machine learning that we're still doing and still very, very important? And I think we might see the pendulum swing back a little bit, because yeah, it's the shiny new tool, right? I got a new hammer, everything's a nail, so I want to hit everything, because and it is interesting. Like you see new challenges and old problems emerging with new techniques, right? Because one of the things I'm finding when we talk to some of our speakers from ODSC, doing some of the LLMOps stuff ourselves, talking to companies that are facing some of the challenges, so we get some insights there. But it's a very collaborative endeavor, because engaging with some of these chat windows, context windows, you're just playing around with yourself, prompt tuning it. But now I find like the data engineering team has to be heavily involved. Database administrators have to be heavily involved. The people working with, you mentioned a ton of different sources that Iguazio integrates with. But we're finding that it requires a lot of team collaboration to build at least a well-oiled LLM ops product, so to speak, with development, fine tuning, and all that stuff. So can LLMOps help with this?
Yeah, I think yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a great Great question and a great point. I mean, the whole point of MLOps is collaboration. And I think that the more the teams collaborate, and we kind of think about it as three kind of different pieces. It's the people, it's the process, and then it's technology. And you can't have one without the other. It's kind of a cycle that feeds into each other. So if you have the people that are collaborating together, I'm talking about data science, data engineering, ML engineering teams that are working together, and then you have the right technology to support that. So you have them working on one environment, one production ready environment, I should say. And then you have the right process to support the people and the tools. That's where you're going to have the win. And we see that the earlier on that these teams collaborate, and by the way, we're also seeing an organizational shift here. It used to be that these teams rolled up to different people. And then you can see the silos really baked into the organization. And over time, we're seeing these teams being consolidated under like a VP of advanced analytics or, similar. These roles are being integrated better in terms of organizational structure as well. And that's feeding into this production first thinking or the production first mindset, where if you have the people working together on the same tooling with the same process and with the same mission in mind, it's going to be a lot easier to get to production and also to scale. And enterprises today are thinking about this as an engine that will support their entire organization. It's no longer a siloed effort of one kind of team doing one use case. I mean, it often starts that way, and that's a good thing. You should always define what's the first use case we're going to start with, how are we going to show business value, and then build from there. But a lot of companies are looking at this as, a 5-10-year strategy. How are we going to transform the organization with AI? And how are we going to do that across departments, across, financial services and customer services and marketing and sales and everything else? Everything can be enhanced with AI. It's just a matter of putting in the right foundation that enables you to build and then to scale once the organization is ready.
No, that's a very salient point. It's making me think as well as because I was asking about development teams, data teams, but what's super interesting. Well, this has always been true to AI, but it's even more true now because the stakeholders have really expanded. Because I always said, because I used to work in finance, used to do a lot of consulting in quant finance, and a bad quant model can put you out of business. And I always thought in AI, once it gets to a certain level, it can have detrimental effects on your company's well-being if it's not handled properly. And I think LLMs are starting to have that potentially come true in the near or midterm future. Because we do have a question here, which kind of leads into that. And so I guess with collaboration, you have other stakeholders you need to bring in, because the question we have is until you train a model with personal data owned by your organization, how can the organization trust in this model to produce expected outcomes? And I know we've already touched upon aspects of that question, that conversation, but again, thinking about other stakeholders, because at the end of the day, if you're an executive of a company, a manager of this department, everyone has a stake in their organization doing well. Like I think LLMOps and MLOps, the collaboration part of that, giving people more visibility and more trust into that. But take that one instant case, like I go to the head of the company and says, okay, we have all this private data, we want to use it to train the models. And of course, they're going to be very skeptical, because what if this goes wrong? So how can we reassure them and that this is not going to blow up the company? So sorry, just if you can, dig into that a little bit, because I think this is kind of like one of the salient points I'd love to get to.
Yeah, but I think that's exactly the point, right? I mean, until you do train the model with your own data, you're not going to get a perfect result. And, this is also true it's really true for any use case in any vertical. I can tell you from the marketing perspective, for example, if you use ChatGPT, you're not going to get something that knows your brand voice, that understands your audience, that understands your messaging, your positioning. You're just not, because it's not built that way. It's built on, generic kind of data, and you get generic responses. So I think that definitely, if you want to see something that provides value for your organization, you do need to use your proprietary data. But it's a really valid point, Seamus, that you bring up. How do you convince, management to invest in this? And I think the idea here is to just start small. It's to start with one use case where you can really see the value, and you can also quantify it. You can understand, what is this going to impact on the business level, not just on the technology level, but on the business level. What can we expect to see a year from now, 2 years from now? And then once we do that and we implement it, then it's very easy to grow, because you show value in one specific use case, and then you have the buy-in to really scale out. And we see a lot of our clients working in this way, starting off with one kind of use case and then scaling to 10, 20, 30. We have ones with hundreds of models that are running in production, but you should always start with something that's small and quantifiable and start with a low-hanging fruit, I would say.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice, and I would definitely echo that. Very well said, Sahar. So, in the last couple of weeks, I think we have a few people speaking on this. I've seen some cool use cases where I think I was mentioning we have a multimodal hackathon going on at West, where people are taking pictures of stuff, and then just based on that picture, the LLM chatbot will answer questions on that. So this is running your cell phone. So, of course, you can build an app right now and just connect it to an API in the cloud. But the industry has been talking a lot about deploying AI in edge devices, and that was challenges way before LLMs came along. And now, because you want those models on the actual edge device because they help. So, is LLMOps currently, or Iguazio currently, or in the future, looking at how can we get these LLM models closer to the edge devices, such as phones and your car and your refrigerator and all that good stuff?
Yeah, so it's definitely something that Iguazio can help with. And I think, the main challenge with edge devices is just the scale. LLMs are very large. Edge devices, you can't deploy very large applications. It just doesn't work. I mean, it's not meant for those types of size, for that type of size. And there are two main ways that you can actually mitigate that issue or that challenge. First of all, you can make the models smaller, right? So we talked about really fine-tuning a model with just the data that you need, just to address your specific use case. It's just a way to reduce the size and to create something that's very specific and exactly for the fit for purpose. And the other point is about GPUs, right? So again, kind of training. Large-scale models require a lot of GPU usage. Larger GPUs are not available right now. I mean, there's backlogs of months and months to order the larger, kind of more advanced GPUs. But you can actually use smaller GPUs and distribute the same model across smaller GPUs. And that's something that Iguazio as well can help with. So when you're doing that and you're also doing GPU sharing to maximize efficiency in each one of the smaller GPUs, you're really reducing the cost and you're making it more viable for edge devices.
Yeah, and just wrapping up our questions here, because this has been a fantastic conversation, and a lot of great questions. But I do like this one also, and I think I want to expand that. But how do you handle model versioning and model drift detection for large language models and MLOps, given the unique characteristics? Because I think there is because wrapping some of the pieces of this conversation together, like when you talk about compliance risk and making sure your models behave in privacy data, like it's very important to have model versioning, right? Of course, so then you can know which models have caused these issues, and we're never working with one model. So that's definitely one thing. And then model drift detection, but of course you talked about data, making sure your data is good, but then we have data drift as well. So that's a double barrel or triple barrel question for you, Sahar, but I think it's a great one if you can address it.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I mean, LLMs require a feedback loop consisting of real-time validation, monitoring of responses, and reinforcement learning from human feedback. And I think more so than any other kind of ML model, it's really important to have a solution in place for model monitoring and for management of the model in production. And it's right. I mean, the Gen AI space is moving so fast that there's always changes that are going to happen. So it's also very important to be flexible and to have an architecture that's flexible to allow for these changes. You don't want to have a situation where you're using a certain kind of tool, that tool changes, and then it just breaks everything else in the in the ML pipeline before that. So you need a tool that's flexible for that. You need a kind of orchestration layer that knows how to handle those types of changes, and you really need to enable model monitoring in real time. And I think that this is definitely one of the more difficult challenges in the LLMOps space.
Yeah, but one of the reasons we have MLOps, right, for not just integration and stuff like that. Yeah, so I think that's very much essential. And just kind of to wrap this up, so when did we start doing? I'm just thinking back to ODSC. I think it was 2016, 2017. We were talking about DevOps was always a thing, and from my engineering background, and then people started talking about data ops. but it was companies like Iguazio who started using the term machine learning operations, and definitely, so you guys were at the forefront of that, and you're definitely at the forefront of coming up with the term of large language model operations. So ODSC was actually able to gain insight on that and do whole tracks around this, thanks to the work of Iguazio and you guys providing some insights on that. So you're the perfect person to ask, Sahar. So what's the future here? What's next? What's the future of LLMOps?
That's a great question. I mean, if I only had a crystal ball. No, I think, look, this whole field is evolving so rapidly. I think that it's going to go in lots of different directions kind of going forward. I think it's going to become a lot more mainstream to use LLMOps in organizations. I think you're going to see a standardization of the way that this is done and the tooling that's required for all the different challenges that we talked about today. One thing that I think is a big challenge, and this is kind of also an open invitation to anyone listening that's in this field, I think that LLMs in foreign languages, there's a huge gap here. And I mean, if you think about it, only 15% of the world speaks English, only 5% natively. And if you think about the need for LLMs in different languages, I think that's a huge kind of open space for anyone who wants to kind of take on that challenge. I think that's something that we're going to see more of in the future. We're going to see more large language models in different languages that are specific for different use cases and requirements of different cultures and so on. And that's something that I'm personally really interested in seeing the development of that field.
No, excellent point. And speaking of different languages and different cultures, Iguazio is based in Israel, a country I hadn't had the pleasure of visiting yet. I was supposed to go there in March of 2020, and that's when they just shut down the country. I was supposed to go to a data science conference in Tel Aviv. So I was super disappointed in that, but it is on my bucket list. But and we all know Israel is like a powerhouse of startups, but most certainly machine learning AI startups. So I think you guys are often referred to as the startup nation. So how has that kind of influenced Iguazio's and your approach to AI and technology innovation in general? Would love to get a quick insight on that.
Yeah, so first of all, you should definitely visit. I mean, apart from AI, we also have beautiful beaches and lovely weather, and it's definitely a nice place for a conference or for just a visit. Yeah, I think it's quite amazing to be a part of the kind of startup nation, and Tel Aviv is certainly bustling with AI startups and other startups. There's a lot of innovation. There's a lot of technology, a lot of very smart people, very motivated and driven people that are doing really amazing things. There's also an ecosystem to support it. I mean, there's VCs and there's grants, and there's a lot of kind of acceptance of this field as something that's propelling the economy forward. And it's amazing to be just a part of that. Also, because there are so many AI startups, it leaves a lot of room for collaboration. And I mentioned earlier that Iguazio's approach has always been to be very open and very collaborative with the ecosystem. That's something that we enjoy doing from here as well, because some of the companies that we work with are actually Tel Aviv based, and that makes it just easier and more just easier for us to implement and to integrate with. So I think it's a really interesting kind of place, and this is again an open invitation for everyone to visit and check out some of the other companies in the Israeli ecosystem.
No, and definitely as part of ODSC, we do help out various startups, and it always amazes me. A lot of startups tend to look just at the US VCs, but I've seen over the years that the Israeli VC community is very, very active, and nowhere near as conservative as the European VC community, for example, or even the East Coast VC community here in Boston. Yeah. Not afraid to call some people out on that. So
it's a very open culture, that's for sure.
yeah, and willing to take a risk, and you can see that. That's one of the reasons why there's such a vibrant startup community in Israel, because the VC community there is definitely willing to take risks that others would shun. So yeah, Sahar, just to wrap things up, First and foremost, there's a number of unanswered questions we didn't get to, and I really apologize for that. But Sahar, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. I'll be happy to answer any questions that were left unanswered.
Yeah, guys, I know a lot of you from joining from LinkedIn or YouTube, but please reach out to Sahar. And last question, Sahar, tell us a bit about your journey to Iguazio and to AI Nation, so to speak.
Yeah, so I've always been kind of, interested and driven and kind of, found myself in the technology kind of realm. So like you said earlier, and it's giving away my age, but I've been in the tech industry for 18 years, started off in an e-commerce company, then worked at McCann Erickson in the digital department. So doing lots of very cool kind of digital ads and campaigns and apps for lots of different companies, and then kind of just continued my journey from there. I've always been really interested in the forefront of technology and where technology is going. When Gen AI just started, we were one of the first to adopt it at Iguazio because we just saw the benefits in the marketing department also, not just for our clients, but also for ourselves. We saw the benefits as a small startup of taking all of these tools and using them to our to our benefit. So we were quite early to adopt Gen AI tools. And, it's just something that I've always been very interested in. For the past 7 years, I've been working at AI startups near Tel Aviv or, in this ecosystem. And it's just an amazing space. And it's also, moving so fast. I mean, I had the privilege really of having a front seat kind of view of the MLOps ecosystem for the past 4 years. And I'm thinking about, the conversations that we had even at ODSC events, 4 years ago, where we had to explain to people what MLOps was and why it's important and why they should be thinking about it. And now, we're talking about LLMOps and, MLOps is already like a given. Now, what's the difference between MLOps and LLMOps? It's amazing to see just the changes in the industry and the maturity that this field has, the whole kind of journey into MLOps maturity is really incredible.
No, that's very well said. You give me a new idea for a byline for ODSC. ODSC, the Fast and Furious AI conference.
It's true. It's true. I mean, think about the pace and the amount of topics that have been discussed in the conferences over time. It would be an amazing kind of graph to show all the different keywords.
Yeah, that is a very good idea. I'll have to look at that. We do try and compare that, and definitely this year it's switched around so much. And for those of you joining, Sahar, you'll be in person at ODSC
Yes.
West. Excellent. Looking forward to meeting you, and those of you joining us.
Absolutely. Looking forward to meeting you and everyone else. And do hit me up if you're at the event. I'd love to continue the conversation.
Yeah, just about to say that. So do introduce yourself to Sahar. Lovely people at the Iguazio booth. Very, very insightful, super knowledgeable. Trust me, it will a conversation you will not regret. So Sahar, I'll see you in a few short weeks. And for everyone else, excellent. So enjoy your weekend. Thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you then. Bye for now.
Thanks so much for having me.
You're very, very welcome, Sahar. So everybody, thank you for joining us. Lots of great questions today. So please do reach out to Sahar, very, very knowledgeable. And please join us for our upcoming lightning interviews and all that stuff. And again, if you want to catch this interview or other ones, log into our AI Plus training platform or just view it on YouTube and you get it there. So until we meet again, have a great weekend and thank you so much for participating as always.